Good afternoon, good evening, or good morning, depending on when you're watching this. I am Shonte Jovan Taylor, and you are having coffee with the neuroscientist and success trainer. Welcome, welcome. And today we have a special guest, not just any guest. He is a neuro coach and neuro leader graduate from the Optimind Institute, and he is an author that he is Darius Wise. Darius, the Professor Wise. Welcome, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, Shonte. I'm excited to be here. I have my drink as well, so I'm with you.
Yeah, so come on in, everybody, and grab your coffee, grab your tea, grab your water or choice of drink, because today you will be taken on a mental odyssey on how to be a more proactive, effective thinker with this interview with Darius Wise. He's the author of What Are You Thinking?
Okay. What are you thinking?
Are you being intentional about your thinking? How effective is your thinking? And so he is going to take you on not just the odyssey within the book, but actually give you some tips and strategies on how to optimize your thinking so that you can get to the next level of yourself in your personal life, in your professional world, and in your business life. So, ready to do this, Darius?
Let's do it. I'm ready.
All right. So, like I said earlier, Darius, the Professor Wise. I really like that.
Thank you.
He is a graduate of our Optimind Institute, where our mission is to empower 100 million minds globally to use their mind and brain better, to operate at the highest level of their brain potential, their mental potential, and everything they do in life. Neuroscience is a 360-degree knowledge, and it affects everything we do and everything we don't do. It is the center of our emotions and our thought processes and our decision making. So we are honored to have Darius, one of our graduates, to do the good work, to put his knowledge, skills, and abilities and in this book, but also fuel it. He took on this extra knowledge, this extra layer of knowledge called neuroscience, brain science, to fuel knowledge and give it to the world. So, Darius, how did you get to the point where you wanted to write this book and share it with the world?
Well, Shonte, it's a very interesting story. I actually had this book idea about 20 years ago. Okay. I thought it was, at that point in my life, I thought it would be cool to write a book. And I actually had the title, What Are You Thinking? So that was something that has been kind of in the back of my mind for quite some time. But what I come to realize later is that at the time, I couldn't write any more than a few uninspiring paragraphs. And I realized that now looking back, I realized that I just wasn't the person that I needed to be to actually write the book. Okay. But I never got rid of the idea. I did bury it for a while, but as I kind of went through life and I was still intrigued about how we think and, our mindset and being successful and achieving your goals, the book idea came back. So about a year ago, I had a radio show that I was doing called Wise Words with Darius. And during that show, the book idea came back with a vengeance. And it was like, all right, you need to write this book. And it was still a piece missing of what I needed to either know or understand to really have it all come together for me. And that piece was the Optimind Neuroscience course. And that's my golden brain. But what happened was my cousin Dr. Denise O'Sullivan, sent me one of your videos. And I think it was one of the videos you were doing with Coffee with a Neuroscience. And I was watching it and I told my wife, Alice, and I was like, this is what I'm looking for. And at the end of the video, you said, the course is closing in 3 days. So if you want to be a part of it, join now. And that was it. And I was like, that's my confirmation. And going through the course kind of gave me that missing piece that I had to really connect all the pieces for the book. So exciting.
Absolutely. I love how you had that epiphany. Thank you, Dr. Sullivan, for sharing the video, first of all. And that's exactly what the mission is. It's empowering 100 million minds. And the reason I selected that number is because, first of all, I'm only one person, and I can only reach so many people by myself, and it may take a whole lifetime to do that. But if I multiply my knowledge,
Right.
and everyone, that people like you who, for some reason, hear the call that there's this ancient knowledge, this wisdom, this organ in our heads that's the center of everything we do as human beings, and we know so much more about it. If we know a little bit more about it, you know a lot more, of course, but it can accelerate your human potential, your thinking, use your emotions as superpowers, for your creativity and your relationships, all of that. And you may not even know the why of learning neuroscience or brain science right away, but something intuitively calls you to the knowledge. Like, of course you need to know about your brain. Why wouldn't you know about your brain? You just know intuitively, especially when you're in that self-growth process.
Right. Yes.
And you're always searching for the next level of yourself. It's that spiritual piece, that intuitive piece where you're always searching for that it.
And for me, one of the things was in my background, because I was really looking at how can I be more successful myself? How can I help others be successful? And I was introduced to these trainings called mindset trainings. And what was interesting was in these mindset trainings that I was, being a part of and listening to and watching, they never talked about how the mind actually works. And that was always the missing piece for me. It's like, how can this be mindset training if we're not talking about the mind, if we're not talking about how the brain works, what's actually going on? And that was really the fuel for me that made me step up and kind of take my research a little further to find out and find that part, the neuroscience, which I wasn't really aware of at the moment, but to find the neuroscience of, okay, this is how the brain works. Take that, couple it with success principles, and then come together with this new thing that really I didn't know of, that was out there. So that's where the book comes from, and that's where I got a lot of stuff that's in the book that I put into the book, is because I merged the neuroscience and success principles together with a little humor and my life, really my story.
Okay.
And here we are.
So what are some of those mindset / brain neuroscience principles that you share in your book?
Well, there are quite a few, but some of the main things and main points of the book are everything we think, we do, and we say matters. Like, everything matters. All of these things play a part. They all are important and integral to our success at whatever it is that we're doing. Another thing that I share in the book is how we need to understand the power of our thoughts. Not only just the power of our thoughts, but why do we have some of the thoughts that we have? And, become conscious about our thinking, because we're constantly thinking, we're constantly having these thoughts, but we usually let them just pass by without giving much attention to them. And then one of the last things that I really share, and I think is a major point of the book, is we need to, once we understand that we have these thoughts, what those thoughts are, why we're having those thoughts, now we need to learn how to become more intentional, more deliberate, conscious, and wise with our thinking.
Why is it so important for us not to allow all thoughts just to come and go? And is there a two-part question? And is there a time when we can let thoughts just come and go?
That's a great question. It's important because what really happens, and this is some of the things that I learned in the Optimind course, is that when you say something, even if it's a thought that you have to yourself, it is actually programming your unconscious mind. So we're programming our mind unconsciously. So if we have these thoughts and we don't give attention to them, then those thoughts now start to actually become part of our programming. They now become things that turn into beliefs that we have. And then from the belief, we start to take action. So, prime example, we may be in a situation where we're having a certain thought. And it may be a recurring thought or a fleeting thought, but then we take an action. We say, how did I get here? Why did I do that? So we're not even conscious of the fact that because of these thoughts that I keep having, that we don't really give much attention to, they have now programmed us, and our actions are reflecting the thoughts that we just had. So it's important that we understand what happens when we have those thoughts. It's not just a fleeting thought. It's not just a passing thought. It's actually part of our programming. Now, once you understand and you're conscious of those thoughts, in the book, I have what I call a disclaimer. There are going to be some things that you have and a thought that you may have, but my disclaimer for that is that's not mine. So there's a chapter in the book called That's Not Mine. So when I have certain thoughts that are not pushing me forward towards my goal, that are not serving me, then I'll just say to myself, that's not mine. And that's kind of my disclaimer to myself to not allow that thought to program me to take that and create actions based on those thoughts.
Now that's really powerful. I know that there's so many times everyone can relate to that question. How did I get here? How did I get in this job? How did I get in this relationship? How did I get into this relationship again? And it just keeps reoccurring because, like you said, it's a program, and program need no operational, intentional, input, because now it's, being fueled by that unconsciousness, and you're just doing things without thinking about it. The brain likes that, actually. We like programs and habits. But if you have the wrong program, like on a computer, you might run a virus. You might run the wrong software that you need to get the job done.
Exactly.
So it's very important it's actually important to ask that question, because that's a certain level of awareness when you say, how did I get here? And as you are listening to this interview and you're listening to Darius describe the background to how you got there, oh, it's in your programming. It's in that thought you let just go by without checking it without having your disclaimers, right? Yes. And so I think it's really powerful that you use the word disclaimer as well, because Stephen Covey, one of the first habit of, he's the author of 7 Habits, right, of highly effective people. The first habit is be proactive rather than reactive, right? And people who are proactive in their thinking, they're proactive in their doing as well, right? So they check their thoughts all the time. And you said something important when you said disclaimer. You say, I don't own that. That's not mine. That means you are more in control of your circle of influence. Okay, what can I control? What can I put intentional action behind? Is this thought serving me right now?
Exactly. And that's one of the things that I question. And one of my goals is to, make people think and help them think and provoke some thought in them. And when I say provoke thought, it's provoke you to think about your own thoughts and challenge some of those things. So I have those, I constantly do it within myself, and I think about what I think about. And that is part of my mission, is to help others think about what they think about. Becoming conscious, becoming aware that I just had a thought. Because that in itself, just that being conscious, Shonte, is one of the things that most people miss, because we're living our lives, 95% of our life, we live unconsciously.
Right.
And just being in a space to say, oh, what was that thought I just had? Why did I have that thought? And dig a little deeper to, like, why did I just have that thought?
Right.
And we have to first just simply become conscious and aware that we had that particular thought.
And that takes mental effort and energy.
It
And
does.
why does the brain disagree with that way of doing? Being intentional in the beginning of our thoughts taking a lot of energy. Why does the brain tend to retract from that?
Well, as you and I both know, the brain is lazy. It likes to be lazy. It likes habits, like you said earlier. It likes habits. It likes routine. It likes to just kind of go with the flow and don't mess up the program. And so it doesn't want us to naturally just kind of challenge every single thought that we have. Plus, this is what I think is big. The other part of that is that we do not learn how to think. Nobody teaches us. It's not something that's taught at home. It's not something that's taught in grade school, middle school, high school, college. Well, college, they're starting to now. But for the most part, nobody's teaching us to think. They're teaching us to just go with the flow, and our paradigm, how we think, the programming is typically set before we're age 7. So now we're just living our life based on what we were taught as children, and we're grown adults and have never challenged, why do I think that? Why do I believe that? And nobody's encouraging the challenge of certain thoughts and the challenge of certain beliefs. So we're never even taught how to think, how to become conscious and aware of what's going on. What we tend to do is we look outside externally for answers as opposed to looking internally for the answers to the questions that we may have as far as how did I get here?
Absolutely. And, when we start to challenge those belief systems and paradigm shifts, once we get our epiphanies, we may start to challenge them and question them, but then we get uncomfortable. Then some fears may come up, and then we realize we got to change some stuff. We got to get out of those relationships, or maybe we need to take up a new skill set that's going to take time and energy away from other things, right? We got to start having maybe difficult conversations, right? We got to start dealing with stuff, and that's when we tend to fall off the wagon. So in January, I like to tell people, don't jump right in to your resolutions. Do that internal work. Ask those questions. Challenge your thoughts, your thinking, right? So what would be about 3 strategies people can use to start the process of becoming more aware of their thinking, so that they can challenge those paradigms and belief systems and truly have those major shifts in themselves to where they're now sustainable? Because one thing about the brain is, yes, it always takes extra energy to learn anything, right? Mental energy, physical energy, riding a bike, learning a new language, all of that. But the more you do it and the more passion you have behind it, right? That's how you do your emotions. It'll start to be more automatic and programmed, but you got to put in that effort first. So if you want to, shift your thinking and be more empowered in your thinking, be a more effective, proactive thinker, because you want to take your human potential to the next level, do the work that needs to be done to change your thinking and challenge your thinking and question your thinking. So what would be a few strategies people could take away with them today?
I have a couple things that I'll share with you. But before we even answer that, Shonte, let me share this. Most people will hesitate in learning something new, trying something new, because we initially have, this goes back to what we're talking about, we initially have the thought that it's hard, that it's difficult, that we're not going to be able to do it. So first we have to be aware that we have those thoughts. And then I will say, first thing that we need to do, first step is first buy the book. Send the book. Book.
Yes.
But I will say, one of the first steps I would say is that people need to think about what they think about. Think about what they think about. What that mean? What does that mean? That means think about what you think about by becoming more consciously aware that you are having thoughts. So how are you? This is one of the things you can do, and I'll share this example. Like, how do you get to work every day? Or how do you take your kids to school every day? That's an unconscious process. But if we actually sit and take some time and say, okay, this is the route that I take. I usually go this way. I go down this street. I make a left. If you think about that, there may be options that come up that give you a better route. Maybe get you a shortcut. Prime example. I was going to work one day and I found that there was a lot of traffic the way I usually go. It's an unconscious process for me. It was a lot of traffic. I didn't want to sit in it. I looked at the map on my GPS in my car, and it showed me another street, and I kind of looked at it, and it showed me how this connected to another street that I usually go to. And I was like, oh, so I went that way. And it actually took me to a shorter route to get where I was going. Now, this street had always been there. It wasn't a new street. It wasn't something that they just opened up. It had always been there. But because of how I was programmed that this is the way that I should go, I had no clue that street was there. And I passed it every single day. And this is how we run our lives most of the time. So the first thing is we have to think, okay, is there a different way I can do this? Is there something new that I can learn that can help me with getting and accomplishing my goal, whatever that may be? So we have to start to think about what we think about. We have to become conscious and aware of what it is that we're doing every day. Now, another mentor of mine years ago taught me this, and this is what really allowed me to be conscious of my thoughts. And I thought this was extremely powerful. So the gentleman's name is George Zalicki. I met George over 20 years ago, and he's a professor of psychology, and he's done some great things in mind work. But what he said and what he shared with me, Shonte, is this. He said, Darius, the mind has two parts. He said, we know all the medical jargon and all that. Forget that. The mind has two parts. There's the thinker and there's the prover. The thinker thinks and the prover proves. And he said, whatever you think, you're going to prove. And so that snapped me out of unconsciously going through life, because now I said, whenever I had a thought, I had the conscious awareness to say, I'm going to prove that. So that gave me the insight to say, okay, now let me be very conscious and think about every thought that I have. Because whatever that thought is that I have, I'm going to prove it. And I realized that you can't be wrong to yourself. So once we become conscious, we understand that we're having these thoughts. Now what you have to do is realize that when you have a thought, you attach an emotion to that thought, it becomes a belief. Those beliefs now become actions that you take, because you take actions in life, and we take our actions in life based on what we believe. Because if we didn't believe that we could do something, we wouldn't take action on it. So we take actions on those things, but we got to step it back and kind of, be able to reverse engineer how we got here and understand it all starts with the thought. And now we have to become more conscious that we're having the thoughts.
That sounds like work, Darius.
It does.
And, where do we learn this stuff? This brain information, this mindset, this truly transformational knowledge. The earlier we learn it, the less work it becomes. And that's why it's so important for educators and parents to understand the dynamics of the mind and the brain, because we can start to, shift the next generation to be those higher level thinkers, so they don't have to make those struggles of going backwards, right? Because it sounds like once you take charge of your thinking, you take more responsibility for where you are. When you question, how did I get here? You can confidently say, because I paid attention to my thoughts and I had the appropriate belief systems and emotions. I took care of my brain power, and here I am. So let's continue that.
Exactly. And even deeper than that is that it's not even your boss. It goes back to when you were a child.
Absolutely.
And what you observed. So we have what I call input peripherals. these input peripherals is how we program ourselves. What we see, what we hear, what we taste, what we touch, those are all our input peripherals, our senses. And we're shown and taught things as little children when our brain is most malleable, and we're picking up all of these things and we carry it all through our life. Mm-hmm. So it is truly important. And that's one of the things my wife and I'm fortunate for me. I think it's a blessing for me that I learned all this, because now I can share this with our children. So we have 4 kids, and I'm constantly, sharing these things with them, and they're looking at me like, but over time, now that, one of them is grown, 2 of them are teenagers, one's 12. So my kids are between 25 and 12. Mm-hmm. So now the teenagers, my older son, they're like, oh, I get it. So now they don't have to go through the struggle that we went through, because I went through a lot to figure all this out. I was the guy, I would consider myself, the good guy next door that you didn't know went through some things.
Yes. And what you're doing and what I'm doing, I have children from 13 to 24 as well. And they roll their eyes when I'm talking about the mind and brain. But you can hear them talking in their conversation. They'll bring up their prefrontal cortex. Yeah, my prefrontal cortex was tired, or my brain was doing this. You don't even know they're talking about it. I'm like, but it's so delightful.
And I'll tell them if they get upset or they're mad or they're angry about something. I said, "Ooh, you just let your prefrontal cortex get hijacked, right? Your amygdala just hijacked your prefrontal cortex." And so now they know the amygdala is what is that part of the brain that's controlling those emotions. And if you know that, you can now build to have more control over it. So, I mean, it was eye-opening for me, because I'll just kind of give you a quick rundown of some of the things that I went through. I grew up with great parents. My parents, Freeman and Sheila Wise, been married now for, 48 years, I think it is. So I grew up in that 2-family household. I'm a native Washingtonian, so I'm from the Washington, D.C. area. And they went through and did the sacrifices to move us out of the city. We grew up in a nice neighborhood. I was fortunate enough to go to college. But after college, 2 months after I graduated from college, I was a single father. Mm-hmm. I had a child 2 months after graduating from college. And then I went from job to job, and my parents' house became a revolving door, because I kept going back in and out, in and out. And I was heavily in debt in my mid-20s, like heavily in debt, not understanding how I was going to do it. Then I got laid off from a job, and I found myself, Shonte, working as a security guard, the midnight shift at a hotel that had a 24-hour IHOP. And one night, in the middle of the night, while I'm sitting there so-called working, I said, how did I get here?
That sounds like the next title of your book.
I like that idea. I was the one that I went to college. I had a college degree. I had a great family. I had a great upbringing and upraising, but I still made terrible decisions. How did that happen? And that was one of the things that really pushed me to find out, how did I get in those situations? And something you mentioned earlier, how did I continue to repeat those same things? I kept going through the same cycle. And I know there's so many people that find themselves going through the same thing over and over and over again. And now what I know and I've been able to do, and it's worked in my life, is understand that it was my thinking. I may have had an idea of doing something different, but my thinking never changed. And the idea and the belief I had of myself needed to change as well. So I had to believe. Mm-hmm. I said,
that's that deeper work.
Different about myself.
Yes.
And if you want to lose weight, let's say, we're in the New Year's resolution time right now, right? We're coming into this new year. People have these resolutions. I want to lose weight. I want to get my finances together. And if you believe that you are that heavy set person, unconsciously, you believe you're that heavy set person, no matter what you do, until you change the image you have of yourself, you're going to always be that person. Because even if you lose the weight, your self-image and your unconscious thought of yourself is, I am a heavy set person. So you're going to go back and gain all that weight back. So we have to change what we believe about ourselves.
Yes. And no surgery can fix your brain, your thoughts. Winning the lottery is not going to fix your financial situation, because you'll end up in the same position of how did I get here again. So you have to do the internal work, and it's going to get uncomfortable. You're going to probably erect some memories that don't make you feel good, but you have to move through it. You got to go through it so you can pinpoint why you came to that conclusion of yourself, of your thinking, because that's where the shift lies. So between that thought, that stimulus, and that decision there's a break, there's a pause where you can change the direction of your thinking so that you can inevitably change your behavior, right? What you're going to eat, how you're going to spend that money. So January is a perfect month to buy Darius Wise's book, What Are You Thinking? Where can they buy this book?
They can actually get the book on my website, which is IamDariusWise.com. IamDariusWise.com. And it's also on Amazon. And it's in all formats. So it's on Amazon.com, IamDariusWise.com. You can get the paperback, you can get the audio version, as well as the Kindle version, the ebook version. So
I'll make sure to post those links so that people can go out and do the internal work.
Yes.
This is before you jump into all those goals or throughout. I think you gave a very good strategy. Start with something simple like how you drive to work, how you drive to the store, and just break it down, literally write it down. Get your whole nervous system engaged in the process. Right. And then allow your brain to come up with new solutions, new thoughts, new ideas, new patterns of thinking to challenge that old way of thinking. That's the beauty of understanding mindset and how your brain works, is that when you truly tap into it and take more intentional ways of dealing with it, it opens up new worlds, new pathways of thinking, right? Like that shortcut the GPS showed you. That's how your brain works. It's like, feed me some new information, some more empowering information. Feed me what I need to thrive and to fuel my 100 billion brain cells so that I can do the work, so that I can be my most limitless self. Okay, the brain is ready to work for you in your favor. But if you are not using it intentionally, it's going to run on those old programs, like Darius was saying, those old habits, and they're not always in our benefit.
No, and that's how we stay in that cycle, and we continue to do the same things over and over again, find ourselves in the same situations over and over again. So we do have to be very intentional about this. And here's something else I wanted to share. And this is one of the things that worked for me. I had to be honest with myself, and I had to be very transparent with myself, because just like the GPS, your GPS doesn't work unless it has two actual points of interest. One of them is your destination. The other one is, where are you? Your GPS needs to know where you are. And the same thing when you're going through this process. Where are you? You have to dig and say, I am in this space, and take that time to be honest with yourself and say, this is where I am. However ugly it may be, however beautiful it may be, you have to be honest about where you are, because we set these New Year's resolutions every single year.
The same ones most of the time.
That's what I'm about to say, Shonte.
We're here.
Most people are setting the same New Year's resolutions year after year after year, not understanding why they're not able to accomplish it, because they haven't changed and challenged their thinking. And this is why your course is so important. And this is why I encourage people all the time to take your courses. Not that you want to become a neuroscientist or you know, all of those things, but you need to understand what is happening in your brain every moment, and that's keeping you in that same cycle of thought, experiences, and accomplishments or lack of accomplishments.
Absolutely. When you understand your brain, you can determine what part of the brain is making this decision. Is it my instinctive? You got your golden brain.
My golden brain.
Is it your instinctive brain? Is it your threat brain? Is it your fear brain? Or is it your higher order thinking brain? Is it your prefrontal cortex? Are you driving your creativity from your right brain? And once you know those points of entry, you can make the next decision and the next decision. And making intentional and conscious decisions, it does take energy. But you also learn that too, how to take better care of your brain so you have the mental energy and wherewithal where you don't go on default mode when you most need your higher order thinking brain. So you just collectively have this knowledge about your brain power that fuels every level of your life. But like Darius said, you have to be intentional. You have to be aware, and you have to know what you are thinking.
Yeah. Now, one thing I want to add about the book, Shonte, is in the book, one of my intentions, and I was very intentional with this, is that, when I took your course, you shared a lot of the correct and proper terminology, the science behind all of this. I think one of my gifts is being able to take something that's very technical and break it down and share it where anybody can understand. And you're very good at that too, but you gave us very technical terminology and you gave us all the correct scientific words, let's say. In the book, I break all that down. So it's not something where you're going to think that you have to have some kind of degree to understand, because I wanted to write a book that I would enjoy reading. So I wanted to break it down so anybody, my kids have read the book. I wanted it to be something that you can pick up and not have to be a certain place in your life to understand it and for it to make sense and for you to apply the teachings in the book and the principles that I share in the book. So I don't want people to think that I'm going to get all this scientific jargon. I do share some things, but for the most part, I don't want you to think you have to be in a certain place for this to make sense to you.
I appreciate you saying that. And that's one of the things I pulled away from your book is that, you give these directives on how to take better, be more thoughtful about your thinking. But not only do you make it simple, but there's a lot of depth to it as well. So you did a really good balance of simplifying the directives, the concepts, but you also added a lot of depth. You have the stories, your personality in it, and you bring it all together. And at the end of each chapter, you share what people can do right away. So you don't have to wait to the end of the book. You don't have to wait or ponder at the end of the book. Okay, that was a great book. I felt good, but what do I do? He makes sure that after every chapter, you have something to do, something to engage your mind to start making the shifts right away. Okay, so you want to make sure you get this book to start off your new year. And it should be, one of your staple books at this point, because it took us decades to get to this way of thinking. It's probably going to take some time to get out and shift our way of thinking, right? So it's a book that you probably want to keep reading again and again.
And it's written that way. It's actually written, and I say this in the introduction in there, is that this is not a book that you have to read chapter by chapter. So you may be going through something in your life and, chapter 5 may be something that gives the answer to that. So, you may be in a situation we're trying to figure out, I'm trying to figure out how to do something. And in the book, you're trying to figure out how to do something. Chapter 7 is the how doesn't matter. And you can just read chapter 7 without reading the first 6 chapters and not be lost and be able to get the answers to what you may be doing or need.
So like a manual to your thinking. So
I like that. A manual to your thinking.
Yeah, that could be your third title of your next book. That's what happens, right? We start talking and all these ideas, they don't stop. And that's what happens when you understand the power of your brain and mind. You have all this these creative juices just flowing more frequently, right? Because now you're not under, that suppression of, those limiting thoughts, right? So your mind is more freer to be, and it has that direction, it has that destination now, right? That's what's so powerful about having a mission. That's the destination. So, and there's multiple pathways to get there as well. But what you were saying is that each chapter is standalone.
Yes.
So that's important. So it's not dependent upon the previous one, although I would suggest reading the whole book in sequence first, and then go back into those chapters that serve you at those point in time. It's like going to a restaurant. You read the whole menu first, and then you go back and delve into the appetizers. Exactly. So where your brain essentially will know where everything is, right?
I tell people this should be on their nightstand. This is one of those books that you can always keep with you, and it's always going to serve you well, I believe. And I do like the idea of people really having something that they can do, and kind of pulls together the entire chapter at the end of each chapter. So that's why I put in that section called What Now? Is so that they can have those 3, 4, 5 tangible steps that they can do, regardless of where they are. My experience, and I've read a lot of books over the years, is that I always felt like you had mentioned earlier, is that I don't know what to do now. Like, this is great information, but what do I do? Or I feel like I'm not even in a place to start based on what they said. And that was one of the things that was very intentional in the book as well, is to have something, no matter where you are, these things will resonate with you. So yes, it's that section, what to do at the end of every chapter, and it's broken down where you're not going to feel inadequate just reading it.
And that is empowering in itself, because sometimes we want to change, but it seems insurmountable. But when you put it in those terms, it's like you're essentially holding people's hand to the next level of themselves until they're able to go off on their own. So the universe appreciates you for writing this book in your own way, in your own time, to empower the people who need it right now and in the future. Thank you so much for sharing coffee with the neuroscientist, Darius. Thank you, everyone, for staying tuned, and those who are on the replay. Thank you. Make sure you ask your questions and share your comments and insights as well. And we will see you next time. And I'll make sure I put those links to Darius's book in the comments as well. So remember, you have one last thing to share?
I just wanted to thank you, Shonte. I really appreciate you. And I really wanted to let everybody know how I was empowered from what you do. And, sharing your story and sharing your insight and wisdom really helped me get what I needed to be able to complete this particular project. So I want to thank you. I appreciate what you've done and just being there to be supportive of me in my journey. So thank you very much. I appreciate you.
Oh, it's absolutely my pleasure. And that just goes to show everyone, when you show up, you never know who is looking to you so that they can show up and the next person can show up. It's going to take all of us to get to the next stage of our humanity. Yes. Right? So we have to be intentional about our thinking. We have to overcome those fears that are keeping us from the next level of ourselves, do the internal work, do the self-growth, do, what you need to do to go to that next level, so that the people coming and seeking what you have can get to the next level of themselves. That's how we're going to get to where we need to be. So thank you, everyone. Remember, when you better your mind and better your brain, you can better your impact as well. Thank you so much, everyone. Take care.
Thanks.